In June 2082, across the wastelands of California, several surviving military units under the command of the legendary Roger Maxson formed one of the Fallout world's most iconic factions, the Brotherhood of Steel. With titles like Knight, Squire, Paladin, or if you were the leader like Maxson, High Elder. The Brotherhood, devout on their journey of preserving technology, especially the ones that make things go boom, has persisted from the first days of the wasteland, all the way through its almost 3 centuries of existence so far. In that time, the Brotherhood has taken part in some of the most interesting events in the Fallout world, from trying to stop the world-ending plague, to almost being completely wiped off the West Coast by factions in the region who wanted nuclear dominance, to even being one of the main reasons for the bottlecap system. So, who exactly are these Wastelanders then? And how did they become one of the most powerful factions in the apocalyptic shitshow that is post-war America, with a near monopoly on power armor and even a flying fortress? And to find out just that, we need to go back to the Fallout world just before the nukes hit the ground. In 2076, as the Americans and Chinese were locked in a vicious war to control the Earth's last remaining resources, things became incredibly desperate. By this point, America was in a full-blown dictatorship, even annexing Canada in the 2050s. The government, headed by an unknown president, was willing to try anything to get the edge over the Chinese. That year, the U.S. Department of Defense moved a military team under the command of Colonel Robert Spindle and Captain Roger Maxson to Mariposa, California, where they had a hidden research and development base to oversee and protect the facility from espionage. What the two didn't know was that they were protecting the Forced Evolutionary Virus Project, where researchers were testing a serum that would turn people into mutant super soldiers. And of course, they were doing tests on human subjects. As the soldiers in the facility came to realize what was happening, Colonel Spindle and Captain Maxson were faced with impending mutiny, as the soldiers refused to be complicit in such crimes. When confronted by the soldiers, Spindle completely melted down, locking himself away in his office, leaving Maxson effectively in charge. Maxson questioned the chief researcher, Robert Anderson, who told him that this was a government order and that he was just following orders. Maxson, in complete shock at what America had turned into, reacted by killing Anderson. This act snowballed, leading to several more executions of scientists, and a public declaration of the Mariposa base seceding from the United States, although the government wouldn't ever do anything about it. Shortly after, the nukes would hit America. Shielded from the blast, Maxson, the Mariposa unit, and their families who were staying with them survived the fallout, no pun intended, and headed for a far more advanced government bunker in the region of Lost Hills, which was about 170 miles from Mariposa. There, Maxson planned to set up a long-term base of operations. After losing tons of people to raiders, including Maxson's wife, and others who decided to splinter off from the group finally made it to Lost Hills. One of the first things Maxson did at Lost Hills was secure communications technology, and then broadcast a message to any survivors across the entire continent, which, just after fighting raiders and losing your wife, is a bit questionable. Like, what if the bad guys come? At any rate, somehow, Maxson received a message back. It was actually from an old military friend, Lieutenant Elizabeth Taggarty, whose unit was stationed in Appalachia. While at first, she was skeptical of Maxson and his unit, since they were technically rebels, after coming to know about the horrors at Mariposa, she was convinced to join his side, although staying in Appalachia. By this point, it had been months since the bombs dropped, and although they had secured a technologically advanced base, Maxson witnessed everyone around him succumbing to depression, as no one really saw a point to, well, anything anymore. Maxson realized he needed to offer a purpose to this unit, and to do that, he needed to give them a philosophy they could live by. And from there, the Brotherhood of Steel was born. The purpose was clear: to be the bastion of civilization, preparing to restore humanity to its previous heights. To do so, they would collect all the remaining technology, preserving it, and keeping it out of the hands of other humans, as Maxson believed that no one could be trusted with the same tools that brought down humanity. Maxson also decided that the Brotherhood would heavily adopt aesthetics from the fall of the Roman Empire, Squire, using titles such as Scribe, Paladin, and Knights for a strict military hierarchy. This structure was outlined in the faction's constitution, which Maxson called the chain that binds. The doctrine demanded strict obedience to a member's superior and forbade giving commands to those who were not direct subordinates, although it rarely happened in practice. And by June 20th, 2082, all those in Lost Hills and Taggarty's camp venture in Appalachia followed the Brotherhood ideology. The Brotherhood quickly grew in both of its detachments, securing more units, bunkers, and technology. But not everything was on an upwards trend for the Brotherhood, especially in Camp Venture. On one of their expeditions to the nearby Cranberry Bog region, Taggarty and her unit encountered another one of the Fallout world's beautiful abominations, the Scorched. The Scorched and their flying counterparts, the Scorched Beasts, were humans and animals that were infected by the Scorch Plague, a product of the nuclear blast. With the capability of spreading the plague through the aerial and ground means, it was clear to the Brotherhood that the Scorch needed to be stopped, or humanity itself could be wiped out. However, while Maxson was clear on his stance, Taggarty, who was on the field, saw the reality of the fight. Outnumbered and outmatched, she knew that they needed to use the nuclear weapons that they had at their disposal, but Maxson forbade it on moral grounds, believing that it could never be done, as those were the very weapons that wiped out most of humanity already. By this point, it was already 2086, and with the bombs being dropped almost 10 years ago, even functional technology began to fall into disrepair, including communication lines between Lost Hill and Camp Venture. Before it was completely lost, Maxson sent out one final message to Taggarty, whose detachment was facing complete annihilation by the Scorch. If you must, use the nukes. However, it was too late for the Appalachian detachment, as they were eventually overrun by the Scorch, making a final stand against their enemy in 2095, where they would lose all their lives, including Taggarty. For the next few decades, the Brotherhood, in what is now the New California Republic, continued their mission, growing in size and in technological advancement. But by 2135, their founder, and god practically, Roger Maxson, died of cancer. His son, Maxson II, replaced him as the High Elder of the Brotherhood, and his grandson, John Maxson, entered into the Paladin caste. Under Maxson II, significant changes were made to the philosophy of the Brotherhood. In 2141, he forbade any outside entry into the faction, allowing growth to only occur through natural reproduction among existing members. Additionally, what technology that would be preserved quickly became restricted to combat technology, and with that began weapons hoarding and expansionist policy. This change led to the Brotherhood's first major conflict with another human faction, the Vipers, a large collection of raiders. The Brotherhood at this point became a major power in the NCR region, which attracted the Vipers to launch an opportunistic attack. In 2150, the two factions entered into a 5-year-long war, and while the Brotherhood ultimately won, it didn't come without a severe price, as Maxson II was killed by a poison arrow. After their war with the Vipers, the pace of the Brotherhood's history began to increase rapidly, with its most major conflicts and events happening afterwards. The first major episode happened 6 years later, in 2161, when a patrol of knights discovered a dead figure. It was a humanoid, but heavily mutated. The Brotherhood's intelligence unit identified this as a mutant, but that wasn't created by the nuclear blast. Instead, it was man-made, as it was A, way more mutated than regular mutants, and B, it was sterile. This led to the Brotherhood finding out about Unity, a faction headed by the Master, who had a plan to make a race of super mutants to control the world. And while that may ring a World War II sounding bell, the Master actually had a compelling motivation for his project. See, the Master was all too familiar with the Great War, and remembered just how devastating it was for humanity. His plan was to create a new human, one that could withstand the effects of radiation, but was also completely identical to their fellow supermutant. This way, they wouldn't be affected by another nuke, and would have no differences with their common man. But while that's the case, he was still crazy as shit, and interestingly enough, the Master was actually making these mutants with the forced evolutionary virus serum that sparked the Mariposa Rebellion all those years earlier. This event actually takes place during Fallout 1, and the protagonist, the Vault Dweller, ends up foiling the Master's plan, and becomes the first outsider to become a member of the Brotherhood since Maxson II enacted the ban. For nearly 80 years, the Brotherhood comfortably remained as one of, if not the most, technologically advanced faction in the Fallout world. But because of that, the Brotherhood suffered from stagnation. So in an attempt to revitalize the Brotherhood, in the 2250s, the governing council of the Brotherhood ordered senior Paladin Owen Lyons to begin an expedition to the capital wasteland, and set up the first Eastern Brotherhood detachment since Taggarty's camp venture almost 200 years earlier. By 2255, Lyons had done so. But what the heads of the Western Brotherhood detachment didn't know was that Lyons had grown angry with the way that the Brotherhood strayed from its original path, as by the 23rd century it had become completely engrossed with accumulating arms and superiority over the other factions, rather than being the bastion of civilizational rebirth. So Lyons ended up cutting communication with the Brotherhood's central command, causing the first major fracture of the Brotherhood of Steel. However, not all members of Lyons' detachment agreed with him, and they formed a separate faction, the Brotherhood Outcasts. At any rate, the Brotherhood now had a firm presence in the capital wasteland, setting up their stronghold in the Citadel. And in 2277, in an attempt to continue their charitability and improvements to the wasteland, Lyons had commenced Project Purity, a water purification plant that would significantly change the resource structure of the wasteland. This brought eyes to them, of course, and the infamous Enclave decided they wanted the project for themselves. What the Enclave did not expect, though, was the Brotherhood was in possession of Liberty Prime, a fucking giant robot, and probably the cousin of Optimus. So yeah, the Enclave lost. But just 1 year later, in 2278, both Owen Lyons and Sarah Lyons were killed. Owen due to the destruction of the Citadel, and the other for unknown reasons. That left the Eastern Brotherhood in a power vacuum, with no capable leaders to fill it until 2282, when a young Arthur Maxson defeated the Shepherd, new war boss of the capital wasteland supermutants. This feat gave the young Maxson a spot as the provisional leader of the Eastern Brotherhood. Maxson eventually solidified himself as the leader of their detachment after brokering a treaty with the Brotherhood Outcasts, reunifying their groups under the appeal of refocusing the Brotherhood on its original path before Lyons changed things. Even those from Lyons' detachment were glad to rejoin the original Western detachment, as they had grown quite weak in the years after Lyons' death. Shortly after, they went on the offensive, attacking and capturing the Enclave-controlled Adams Air Force Base, which housed numerous vertibirds and other nuclear-powered vehicles. And with that, they also began the construction of the Prydwen, the infamous airship that serves as the Brotherhood's main base. But just at the time as the Lyons were killed, back in the West, the NCR were conducting an aggressive expansionist policy. To the Western Brotherhood leadership, this was a threat to the faction's existence. So, they put forth a plan to rapidly increase their efforts to secure weapons technology in order to prevent it from falling into NCR hands. Up until this point, the NCR and the Brotherhood, while not exactly allies, were definitely not enemies. In fact, the NCR even named one of their regions after Roger Maxson. However, they viewed the Brotherhood's actions as a violation of their sovereignty, and the two factions waged war against each other. Unfortunately for the Western Brotherhood, the NCR outmanned and outgunned them, leading to a resounding Brotherhood defeat, with nearly 50% of the Mojave chapter's forces being wiped out. This effectively ended Brotherhood influence in the West for years to come, allowing the NCR to heavily increase their presence in the region. However, the NCR learned that they couldn't defeat the Brotherhood without a cost. Literally, the war effort crippled their economy. The NCR reintroduced the gold-backed dollar, but they emptied their reserves fighting the Brotherhood. This sent their economy into a downward spiral of hyperinflation, and faced with no viable currency, vendors in the NCR created their own, bottlecaps, backed by a standard measurement of water, an equally rare resource to gold. However, while the Brotherhood was nearly wiped off the wasteland, make no mistakes, the Brotherhood are definitely still around, and may even be returning to the dominant force they once were.